from Western North Carolina. Natrona Heights is not exactly my briar patch. I grew up in Clinton Township, just a little bit northwest of there in southern Butler County. But I learned recently I was born in Tarentum. No, I'm sorry. I learned recently I was born in Natrona Heights. My whole life, I thought I was born in Tarentum because my mother always said that I was born in Tarentum Hospital, but then I learned recently that back about 1918 or 19, the Tarentum Hospital moved to Natrona Heights. So that's where I was born. My earliest childhood memory was in Natrona Heights. In fact, right there at 1522 Broadview Boulevard. And I learned this when I was messaging with Carol Coker Holmberg. I had my tonsils out when I was 3 years old, and I mentioned to her that Dr. Rollins who did it, and she said, well, that's exactly where the library is. His residence and office was torn down, and the library branch is now right there. So I'm right back where I was about almost 80 years ago. I just mentioned that there were about 3 possible subject areas that occurred to me when John talked to me about this. In general, what I came away from with this project was the contrasts and the similarities of things, social and political and legal, medical professions in 100 years ago and today. Secondly, I learned that anybody can publish a book. Kindle will publish anything at no cost. And in fact, the self-publishing industry is booming, and there are many resources out there that you can draw on. So if you have any interest in becoming an author, it's easy, and I'll be happy to give you 2 or 3 shortcuts. And third, people might wonder why I did this, which I wonder about myself sometimes. But when I was growing up, I used to hear these stories about the murder that my grandfather witnessed, and we'd talk about it in family gatherings. And that was kind of intriguing. There was also a photograph that I saw one time of a victim, Edward Coomer, stretched out on a rail fence. That was haunting, and I can still, I mean, it's been 60 or 70 years since I've seen that photograph, but it stuck in my memory. I wish I could have located it, but I never could locate one of those. And then the third thing is that there are a lot of resources available. And in fact, so many resources, I felt something had to be done with them. So I jumped into it. So with that, John, that's some possible subject areas. If you or anybody else want to talk about them or ask any questions, let's proceed.
All right. One thing that I just wanted to ask real quick, if you wouldn't mind talking about, one thing I wanted to know is what, I guess, what sort of kickstarted you doing this, writing this book? Was there any kind of, like, was there some event, maybe meeting with someone, talking with someone, or just remembering hearing about this?
Well, my 2 or 3 of my brothers and I were talking about it 2 or 3 times, and we had different memories of different aspects of it. So we started digging around a little bit. 2 of us remembered that photo that I mentioned earlier. And then the other thing was that I started doing a little research on it, and I found out that there was a volunteer at the Butler Library who I noticed has checked in here, Carol Holochuk, who was working on a project. She was pulling together information on 10 notable murders in Butler County, and I connected with her, and the Blakely murder was one of the ones that she had a lot of information on. She gave me a tremendous amount of help and encouragement, and articles from the Butler Eagle and some articles from the Valley Daily News that back in those days. And I guess the other thing is that as I rifled through family information, looking at old photos and things, I had this farm record, well, not farm record, but this ledger book that my grandfather kept. And he noted every penny that he spent or took in. And that was kind of fascinating. And that helped provide a lot of detail to the family part of the story. So it was just a whole collection of things. And frankly, I started it back in 2018, and I don't remember exactly which day or what particularly inspired me. Learning that the entire trial manuscript was in existence. That was encouragement. And when I got hold of that, I realized that something needed to be done with that. There was a lot of good information there.
All right, very good. One other thing I guess I forgot to mention, first and foremost, maybe for some of us who haven't ever heard of this event, or maybe haven't read your book yet, could you give like maybe like a very brief summary of sort of what went down in terms of the trial and sort of the background of what was going on here?
Sure, and I don't want to bore people, so I'll try to make it real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, at about 1 o'clock in the morning on April 3rd, this Henry Blakely broke into my grandfather's house, although it wasn't locked, I guess. Was rummaging around and woke up my grandfather, and he wanted him to come over to his place. Said there was a fight over there, and he needed, somebody was hurt. He thought somebody might be hurt, and he needed some help with him. So my grandfather followed him over out in the dark. Blakely was carrying a big club with him. He was had a reputation of being frequently drunk and half crazy anyway. So there's no doubt my grandfather was afraid of him. So he tried to go along as well as he could and as little as he could. And they pretty quickly came across Coomer trying to crawl across the fence. And they said Coomer probably would have died anyway, but Blakely at that point didn't leave any doubt. He took the club and crushed his skull with several blows. And that led to the trial. And the trial, the interesting thing about the trial to me was the number of witnesses that they gathered up. Prosecution had a whole string of witnesses that testified about how terrible a person Blakely was. And then the defense brought in a lot of witnesses, and they were running down 3 different tracks, as I understand it. I'm not an attorney, but first of all, they tried to establish with self-defense. They tried to establish that Blakely had been totally intoxicated for a couple of weeks and didn't know what he was doing. That he was somewhat insane from childhood when he got kicked in the head by a horse and got flu on top of that, which they felt gave him epilepsy, and he was suffering from petit mal, which is a mild form of epilepsy, and maybe was unconscious at the time and didn't even realize he killed Coomer. So those were that's kind of an overview of it. The defense attorneys, first of all, tried to postpone the trial because they wanted Blakely's mother to testify about how he got injured as a child. That didn't work out, and they tried to quash the trial by claiming that the jury pools for both the grand jury and the trial were illegitimate because there were women in the jury pool, although no women were called to serve on the jury. The judge threw that out real fast because he pointed out to them that due to the 19th Amendment, which had just been ratified by Pennsylvania the year before, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decided that women did merit to serve on juries. So that didn't go anywhere. And then the trial went on for about a week. A lot of testimony, a lot of characters. I used the verbatim trial testimony to try to give the flavor of the characters with slang. As I mentioned in my prologue, I regret that I had to use so much of Blakely's profanity and blasphemy, but I felt that scrubbing it out would It would not accurately depict the crazy guy. The trial lasted about a week. The jury found him guilty in about 4 hours. And then the defense tried to get him off. They tried to get a mistrial because of some things going on among the jurors. That didn't work. They tried to appeal to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Supreme Court threw it right back and said the county district court had done it properly. And he ended up, I mean, it started with a murder on April 4th, and it ended up with Blakely going to the electric chair on August 2nd, 1922. So it didn't stretch out too long. In fact, maybe we should have scheduled this conference a couple weeks later on October 2nd. It would have been exactly 100 years since he sat in that electric chair.
Wow. All right. Let's see. I think you answered pretty much all the questions I had. So that's good. We're almost 15 minutes in, so that's actually good. That's sort of what I was aiming for. So for the rest of this, what we're going to do is we're going to open the floor up more or less to people who have any questions, comments, that sort of thing. I did want to go ahead and mention that some people I know are your relations. So I did mention this to Glenn before. If you guys want to stick around after the main Q&A session, that sort of thing, if you want to catch up, that's all well and good. I'll be doing that, we'll say like 6:45 or so is about the cutoff time we'll have for the Q&A.
Yeah,
unless we have a few more people who have some good questions, then we'll give a few minutes for, or a few more minutes for that. But yeah, feel free if you just want to stick around after the Q&A session, if you want to just chat or catch up or whatever. That's all good. But otherwise, we'll get started. So if again, I'll just ask, if you're not speaking, just keep your mic on mute, just so there isn't any feedback or anything. Otherwise, feel free to start asking questions. Either you can do so vocally, or if you want to type it out in the chat and I'll read it aloud.
I'm not sure exactly where the farm was with Blakely.
Oh. I'm sorry. Hold on. I'm sorry, Nancy, were you asking a question? I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry. Larry. You're on mute.
But I
Everybody's like
didn't-
me, they're probably playing with this screen and trying to figure out the pictures and the settings and all of that.
Oh, okay.
Neat
All right.
technology though.
Oh, no, you're good now. All right, you're unmuted.
I was curious exactly where his farm was. I knew what the Price's farm, but was he where the Thompsons are now? Or was he where Aunt Dot and Uncle Ken lived later?
I'm probably not the best one to answer that question. Yeah. Oh, let's see. Our grandfather, Frank, was living at what they called the Elliott Farm, which is between where Aunt Dorothy and Uncle Clifford lived. Blakely apparently lived just across that road from him. I was a little unclear in the testimony. I never did get it straightened out because they kept referring to the Saxonburg to Renham Road, and I think those roads have different names now. So I'm not exactly sure which farm was Blakely's. Now, one person who is on here I know is the director of the Freeport Library. She mentioned the Thompson farm, I think. And maybe that's what it was called. Maybe that's what Blakely's place was called later.
I think that's probably the one it would have been for him going then, and then the Elliott was further down the road.
Well, I think that's right, but that's exactly right. However, the farm that Grandpa bought was, that one was an Elliott's farm. So I think he bought an Elliott's farm, and then there was Blair Elliott, who was in the trial, lived on down the road as well. Any of you locals who grew up there know, shed more light on that?
Oh, someone here wanted to ask if that farm was on Elliott Road.
I don't know that
No.
for sure.
Hollow. Yeah,
House Run.
House Run Road.
House Run.
Grandpa's farm was on Elliott and on
House Run.
House Run Road. The corner, the north corner of that. And I think the other one is between Thompson Road and
House Run.
House Run.
House Run. Mhm.
Is there a big pond there?
There is now on the Elliott.
What's the name of the township?
Oh, what's the name of the township?
Buffalo.
Buffalo.
Buffalo. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
It's Buffalo Township, and after grandfather Frank Harvey died, the farm was sold to Dr. de Blasio,
Mhm.
and I think he's the one who put the big pond there.
Yes.
It's still there, but I've been back there for quite a while.
Who lives there now?
Anybody there know?
Actually, most of the fields went back to woods, and some people have put bigger houses back in the woods. The fields have all grown up.
Did they ever find any moonshine stills when they were building those new houses? That was one of the rumors that Blakely was involved in moonshine. And one of the things that puzzled me that I never found an answer to was, how did he have so much money? I mean, not that he had a lot of money, but he wasn't working real steadily. He had a pretty good legal team. I don't know if he had to pay for them, but I think at one point he had to pay for a copy of the trial book, which was, I think, $700 or $800, a lot of money back in those days. And he always had money to buy moonshine if he wasn't making it himself. So there were, within the family lore, there were a lot of different theories about what was behind Blakely besides just being a crazy guy.
Did he have a family?
Oh, he did. And that's one of the things that I thought was weird. He had one son who had grown up and left at the time of the trial. He was maybe 25. And he had another one who was about 21 who was living at a neighbor's and working there. And then he had two daughters, one at home, she was about 20, One was a 16-year-old, I believe, living in Tarentum and working for somebody there. And then he had two little boys, 12 and one younger, 7 or 8. And the defense attorneys put the 12-year-old boy, the 15, 16-year-old girl, and the 20-year-old girl on the stand and had them attest to their dad's drinking habits, describe what went on the night of the murder. There was a big fracas at his house and a lot of fighting and swearing and stuff going on. And then what I thought was somewhat bizarre was the 21-year-old who was at this dance, and there was a dance that night before this happened. The 21-year-old was so drunk he couldn't make it home, and he ended up sleeping along the road somewhere. And the defense attorney put him on the stand and had him describe that for no content except the fact that he was too drunk to get home. And you got to wonder what impact did that have on those kids, especially those two little boys who were 8, 12, and 16-year-old girl, 20-year-old daughter. It's just I'm not sure that would happen in a trial today. I'm not sure they would put the defendant on the trial on the witness stand today either.
I don't know if you happen to know this. Are there any of their descendants in the area left?
Well, I looked pretty hard and I didn't find any. If I had, I'd have been maybe would have done things a little bit differently, but I couldn't find any. I looked on ancestry.com, I looked on Facebook, I checked census records. I couldn't find traces of any. I found a few traces where Blakely's children had, I think I confirmed they were all deceased, and undoubtedly, I mean, that was 100 years ago. And I couldn't find any descendants either. I did find a couple of relatives of Coomers, but pretty distant relatives, and I connected with them on ancestry.com. I don't know if anybody in the area knows of any others being still around. I'm sure, I know they're descendants of some of the witnesses there and some of the neighbors.
Renham and Coomers in Mars. Maybe they're related.
Could be.
I think, I don't know why I'm thinking the one that lived in Mars, he probably died 50 years ago, but I think his name was Ed. I think.
Someone, see, Rick Monty in the chat asked about how long did it take for you to write your manuscript, and how did you find a publisher?
Well, let's see. I started collecting information in 2018, and I probably drafted the first 3 or 4 chapters at that time, 2018, early 2019. And then we had a lot of personal stuff going on in 2019, and I just set it aside. Picked it up in December, and I worked on it pretty hard from December through May or June of this year. So time-wise, maybe altogether 8 or 9 months. I never tried to find a publisher. I just decided from the beginning that I was going to self-publish it. As I mentioned, Kindle will publish anything as an ebook. There's no charge for it. They have you go into their editing program and you load the information in, and they'll format it into a book. All you do when you're done, if they accept it, and they only reject it if there's something wrong mechanically with it. But if they accept it, then you just set a price and a royalty rate, and they put it out there. It doesn't matter if anybody buys it or not. It's sitting out there, and you can go in and download it yourself. And that's what I realized is kind of neat about it. If you want to do just a family history, just for your own family, publish it as a Kindle ebook, and even if nobody buys it, you and your family can get e-copies of it for a couple bucks. So it's, pretty simple, straightforward way to get something into, get something documented. Having said that, though, I found an organization called Reedsy, or Reedsy. It's a British company, but it's a coalition of several thousand freelancers all over the world who do various kinds of publishing services. And so I used them in two ways. One way was, in my case, I put up a brief description of the book, looking for a cover designer. And so then they fed me about 8 or 10 possible candidates for that type of book. But there were hundreds there if I wanted to look further. And actually on the cover design, I ended up with the artist who designs a lot of James Patterson's books. And that didn't cost very much. I mean, it was a few $100s. I wouldn't do it if it was just strictly a family book, but I did want it to look professional. And then I also was looking for some editorial help. The book is about, I tell people it's like one third history, 1/3 family information, and 1/2 trial. And that adds to more than one, but there's some overlap there. And it's really just a sidebar for a second here. It's kind of 2 books in one, which is not a good idea. If you're going to publish a book, you ought to just do one. But it's about 1/3 family history and then a lot of the trial stuff. But at any rate, the family stuff I wrote, I had to put it together from whatever resources I had. And as I mentioned, the one about the mafia and moonshine, I made that up just based on rumors and family rumors. And I did a little research into the mafia in the Pittsburgh area. So I was looking for an editor to help me with those first 3 or 4 chapters that I wrote, and I found a guy to do that. Then once I got into the trial, I was just using bits and pieces of the trial manuscript. So I wanted to use that verbatim anyway, so I didn't need an editor. But anyway, I pulled it all together. And then there was one other thing I got from Reedsy. Reedsy came out with what they call a book editor, and the name of it is Atticus. And that was a tremendous thing because it was better than Kindles. So what I did was these documents I had, which were Word documents, I uploaded them into the book editor, and the book editor accepted them in a mode called writing. And I could do some editing. I had choices of typefaces. I could use bold, underline, italics. And they had one other choice, which was interesting, and that was monospace, which Word and Word doesn't have monospace option, but what monospace is the letters are all the same width, whether it's an I or a lowercase l or a W, they all are assigned the same amount of space because that's what typewriter keys had. So I used the monospace for the trial manuscript. So in the book, I hope it looks like it was typewritten copy, because it was really just a direct transcript of the typewritten copy. But that gave it a typewritten look, I think. But at any rate, this book editor, Atticus, I would put the information into it. I could put page breaks in there. I could insert photos any place I wanted to. And then it had an option of format. When I clicked on format, then from there I could choose print or Kindle or iPad. And if I click on one of those, it would show me exactly what that chapter or that page was going to look like in print form or on iPad or Kindle. And that was really helpful because then you could work with the spacing and things like that. So, I mean, but I found that a little bit late. Most of the good things I found a little bit late. And as a result, if I were doing it all over again, I probably could have done it in half the time. I don't know if that answered the question about how long it took and how I got there, but oh, and once you do, once you load the ebook into Kindle, then that Kindle is owned by Amazon, and Amazon has another division called KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing. And then you can produce a paperback copy using all the same material. It needs a little different cover design, but I did that, and so it ended up with paperback copy. And again, I get to set the price and pick a royalty. And I'll tell you, I don't get much royalty. I didn't expect to because I didn't do it for that reason. But anyway, it's a pretty simple process. You just got to apply yourself to it, and you need to get the material into a Word document of some form, and then from there, you just have a number of options, all of which are pretty easy.
One question someone had here was, do you have any relation to a Carl Harvey?
Carl Harvey is one of my cousins. He was he's still alive. As far as I know, I've kind of lost track of him, but
Yeah.
Carl Harvey is son of Chester, and Chester was Frank's oldest son.
Okay.
Frank, I'm gonna run through Frank's children, since there are some of his grandchildren here. Frank's oldest child was Chester, who was 21 at the time this all took place. He was born, obviously, about 1900. And the second was Ralph, known as Red. Ralph lived in Fawn Township, and he and all of his children are deceased now. Third was, I sometimes forget whether it's my father Howard or Dorothy, who was older. Howard was older, and Howard had 4 sons, of which obviously I'm one. And then Dorothy lived near Frank Harvey, and was a big support of his. She and her kids were for the rest of Frank's life. Then in Frank's second marriage, he had, and those first 4, the mother of the first 4 was Clara Smith, who died when my father was 8 years old of a heart condition. Then his second wife, Susie, bore Martha and Clifford, and those were the 2 youngest children. And I think we have some Martha's and Clifford's kids here with us this evening.
I don't think that Carl ever married.
I'm sorry, what's that again, please?
I says, I don't think Carl ever married.
Oh, the Carl Harvey we knew was married and divorced. I mean, our cousin Carl was married and divorced fairly early on. I don't really know if he's been married since then or not.
All the antique cars.
He was into cars. Yeah, I know that. Yeah. I know in front of his house, he had a sleigh sitting out there for a lot of years, and that was Frank Harvey's sleigh. And my grandfather told tales about riding in it. And then, yeah, Carl was into cars.
Has a lot of cars, old antique looking things sitting in his front yard
Yeah.
on Eakestown Road.
Right.
Which wouldn't really be too far from these farms that you were talking about.
That's right. He wasn't too far away. That's right.
So let's see. Nancy in the chat asked, do you have any maps of the surrounding property?
No, I really don't. That's a good question. I probably should have. And that may have helped the book if I had had a good county map of that part of the Buffalo Township that showed some of those farms, but I'm sorry, I never did pick up on that one.
All right, well, we have about 5 more minutes. If anyone else has any further questions. Oh, you can, what was his second wife's name?
Let's see. Okay, first wife was Clara Smith. And Clara Smith's father was a businessman in the Butler area. At least 2 of her brothers became doctors in the area, so there were some Dr. Smiths there. His second wife was Susie Baxter, and she tragically died of the Spanish flu. We didn't talk about that, but that was a pretty big thing. I mean, that living through COVID, we have a pretty good feel of what a pandemic is all about, but it was nothing like the Spanish flu. And Susie, as the family stories go, took care of all the kids went down with the Spanish flu, and she took care of them until she caught it and succumbed to it. And at that time, Martha was only about 3 years old, and Clifford about 1.5 years, I think. And that's when then Frank was looking for a housekeeper and found Carrie Armstrong, who ironically or coincidentally, her husband and her teenage daughter died of the Spanish flu in the same October that Susie did, October 2018, I guess it was. The Spanish flu was a horrible thing. I mean, it reduced the world's population by about 3%. Maybe killed 50 million people globally. Just really terrible. In fact, more US soldiers, I've read recently, died from the Spanish flu than from battle wounds and being killed in the war.
Now, was that property actually in Clinton Township or was it in Fawn Township?
The
Or is
property
it right on the borderline there?
it was all in Buffalo Township.
It's Buffalo.
Yeah. Just adjoining Clinton Township. Frank was born at the Patrick Harvey homestead, which is in Clinton Township. He was the first settler of Clinton Township, which is just above the town of Lardintown, if you're familiar with that area, not too far from Millerstown. And then, in fact, we still have a cousin several times removed who lives on that Patrick Harvey homestead. But no, the Frank Harvey's farm and Blakely's farm were in Buffalo Township, pretty close to Allegheny County, of course, because Frank sold his produce. He traveled 7 or 8 miles to Tarentum and Breckenridge and Natrona to sell his farm produce every Friday and Saturday.
Your Frank, was he related to the Frank that lived in Mars? Frank Harvey?
I don't think so. I never knew that we, maybe some of my cousins know, but I never knew that we had any Harvey relatives in Mars.
Because I remember him from many years ago. He lived on Clay Avenue. Well, he's been dead probably for 40 or 50 years, but I remember him.
Was he a pretty upright gentleman?
I'm not gonna get into that.
I was no relation, never heard of it.
Janet in the chat asks, are you related to Don Harvey, who had Harvey Lumber on Bull Creek Road?
Yes, Donald was a son of Ralph. That would be Frank's second oldest son, Ralph. Donald was his son.
Oh, sorry. How long's that been out of business?
How long has it been? I'm sorry, what?
Out of business.
On the lumber business? I don't know the answer to that. I know Don died and that ended the lumber business, but I don't remember which year that was.
Can you still buy the book?
Oh, someone asked, can you still buy the book? The answer is yes. I'll put the link in the chat. If you look on Amazon, you can also get it on there.
And we have it here in the library.
We also have it here at the library. Yeah, if you want to come in and borrow a copy.
Yeah, and I put it out on Kindle in their, I forget what they call the program, but somebody who's a regular Kindle user can sign up for something where you get free access to Kindle books so many at a time. You can borrow them for, I don't know, a short period of time. So it's out that way. If somebody's on Kindle and they're signed up for that, you can get it free. But otherwise, if you just go onto Kindle or Amazon and search on the title, it'll pop up. But go to your local library. I mean, I've donated copies to the branch that's hosting this there in Natrona Heights. I sent a copy to the Freeport Library, the Saxonburg Library, the Butler Library. So if you're in the area, don't spend your money on a book, just go borrow it.
Glenn.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, I can hear you, but I missed the question. Go ahead.
That wasn't a question, but this is Carol Holochuk. Down at the library, we probably have about 300 murders or mysterious deaths, however you want to call them, murder suicides. There aren't 10. There's a lot more than that. And I'm still playing with them.
When are you going to publish your book, Carol?
I don't know. At this point, I don't know if the library's just going to make. They may make a binder out of it. No.
Yeah, I know you, but didn't you start with some of the outstanding ones that were in the early years of Butler County?
Yeah, the ones that I wrote some chapters up on, except for there is another big one I didn't bother with because it was Russians down in Lindora, and it was very hard to follow because the newspapers kept spelling their names different ways, and I just didn't bother doing it. But there's a lot of them down. I mean, if anybody wants to check at the library and put their last name in, you can find out if your family name is in one of the murder files.
No.
Or someone you know.
Sorry, Carol, did you do anything on the Biddles?
The Biddle
The
brothers.
Biddles were not in Butler County.
Okay.
What county were they in?
I believe when they were caught in Lawrence County, and they murdered down in Allegheny, so they don't fit the criteria for what I collect.
Okay, because I know they did come up Route 8. And we're in
Yes,
Middlesex,
yeah.
and some stuff there in Middlesex before they went on up.
Yes,
Is that correct?
yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that story.
But technically, I try and stick to collecting murders that were committed within the county limits. Now we're starting to get a few that they were former Butler County residents, but they were killed somewhere else. I don't know how I got involved in this stuff, but
Boy, that's
it's
not-
just very interesting.
Hmm.
Is she the Saxonburg Library for sure?
No,
Oh, sorry, what library? Are you
I
at?
volunteer. I volunteer at the Butler Library.
Oh, okay,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
All right. If anyone has one more question.
I just want to say hi. Tell them Cindy said hi.
Oh, Cindy says hi.
To Glenn.
Yes.
I just wanted to say hi, Glenn. It's Cindy.
Hi, Cindy. Good to see you. I haven't quite found you yet. You're down. I'm playing around here with my screen a little bit.
Here, she's on my camera. Let me. Whoop.
Can you see me?
You're from Mars, right?
Right.
I can't see you. You must be somewhere between here and Mars.
Right. You got that right.
If you see Linda Harvey, she's from Mars also.
Hmm.
Oh, I don't see Linda. Where is she? I put my glasses on. There. Okay.
Well, hey, thank everybody for coming. I appreciate you checking in here. I especially appreciate the library there in Natrona Heights. John, thank you. And please thank Susie Ruskin, the library director.
Yeah.
Let's see, one thing I'll hold up here, just in case you think of some questions later that you want to ask me. Here is my email address, and I'll always respond. So I'll hold this up here for a little bit in case you want to jot it down, send me some burning question.